Welcome. This is the June PKI Solutions, PKI Insights. We're really excited to have you joining us this month. A little special treat where we get to kind of talk some technical things in the PKI space today. I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge, Jake and I have been kind of talking about this offline. This has been a very popular topic.
Very.
I think just before we entered, we were at 600 attendees for this webinar. So a lot of people interested in talking about ADCS and changes that are there. If this is the first time that you're joining us for one of our monthly PKI Insight webinars, welcome. Say hi in chat. We'll be trying to get to questions as best as we can. So if you want to add your questions, we'll try to get to those in the Q&A session as well. We are going to make this available for streaming afterwards as well. So if you have coworkers that aren't able to join or you can reference back to this later on, we'll have that available for you. Today, we're going to go through some recent announcements of what's new with certificate services in 2025, why that kind of matters, and some of the use cases that we've been talking about, as well as post-quantum cryptography support, and also some recent changes to the CAB forum. I'm your host today, Cooper. I'm the president and founder of PKI Solutions, and joining me is our illustrious Jake our managing consultant. Jake, you've been with me now for how many years?
We're either coming up on 8 or 9 here at the beginning of August.
Yeah, quite some time. Jake was actually the first employee I ever hired. He's been with us a long time. He works with all of our customers now, and in many ways sees many more issues in our customers than I do. And I think you take great joy when you find a problem I've never seen before. So
I do. Especially when I know the answer.
Yeah, there's often a lot of times that I have to say, go talk to Jake. I don't know that. So that's a great thing. I think combined between the two of us, we have close to 50 years of PKI expertise.
Yes.
So this is something near and dear. I think one of the things that's really interesting to me as we kind of look at the agenda and these changes is just acknowledging something that we've been saying to our customers for quite some time, that certificate services and the updates and changes to the product are really being driven off of Microsoft priorities, and those are somewhat a flexible thing. It is something that third-party providers have taken advantage of, and there's been a lot of marketing FUD out there regarding Microsoft discontinuing certificate services. It's not updated. You should buy our product. I think right now there's a lot of companies that are probably recalibrating their marketing campaigns because many of them are based around buy our solution. Microsoft is getting rid of ADCS. Jake, you probably hear this.
The silence was deafening for a long time.
Yeah,
but now there are changes. We went a long time without a lot of changes, and now all of a sudden there's a bunch of them coming our way. So this is a good thing.
I think a lot of it is driven simply because of the fact that a lot of the typical use case needs were already being met in ADCS. Third-party companies that wanted to compete in the space, the only thing that they could really sell was fear. And I know I've had a lot of recent blog posts about avoiding the FUD factor and really going off of the reality. So I'm really glad that we're getting a chance to talk about some of these new features. So we'll talk about what was in the recent announcement and some of those use cases. We'll talk about the changes coming for post-quantum and some of the capabilities that were recently announced. And then we'll dig into another topic slightly adjacent, is the changes from the CAB forum as it relates to the publicly trusted TLS certificates and lifetimes that are out there. So slightly adjacent, but we'll get to it. So a couple of updates to go through. Microsoft now has an active project manager for certificate services. Her name is Tanya Ya. Interestingly enough, the previous project or product manager at Microsoft for ADCS was Rashmi Jha, no relation. But Tanya, I recently had a one-on-one conversation with her a few weeks ago after these announcements, and she is getting her legs underneath her as far as what infrastructure exists at Microsoft. There is a lot of things that they are targeting. She has desires to get a TAP program going. So if you've been a long-time Microsoft customer, this was essentially like beta customers that were interested in some advanced product deployment and implementation along with support programs. The ability to have a TAP program means that there's a lot of weight behind this from the Microsoft perspective. She echoed that the recent updates that were announced were just the start of what she has. These are just the beginning of things, but she is looking to start customer feedback forums. She wants to meet with customers to figure out what capabilities. I see references to Acme, for instance. That's something that she brought up as well. She wants to hear what customers are needing to see in the product, is what you would expect to see from a product manager. So she is getting all of those things kind of put in place. So what we know is that the recent feature announcements that were launched, and we're going to go into in just a second, sounds just like the beginning of what they have planned. This was not a one and done. But she has a team and expanding those development resources to be able to do more of these things. So it's great to see that there'll be that active development going on. The recent updates, these are impacting things like revocation, preparation for post-quantum, some updates to the security side, and we're going to dig into that. The other part, Jake, if I remember right, these were targeted at Server 2025, but then there were also comments about backporting to some recent versions of the operating system, right? Am I remembering that?
That's what I heard. I don't know how far back they're going. I think it's chronological. They're going to go back to most recent first and go back that way. But yeah, same thing. I'm hearing that as well.
Yeah. And what are we seeing in most customer environments today? Are they on 16, 19, 22, 25?
19 and 22. A lot of clients still on 16. We had a lot of clients took a long time. Everyone seems to jump. We'll jump a release. So a lot of our clients were on 2016. We had a lot of clients that stayed on 2012 R2 a long time. A lot of clients on 2016. But surprisingly, or maybe not a lot of clients at all yet on 2025. A lot of they're still working on that gold image to get that rolled out.
Yeah. So I think that's an important thing that we're seeing then, is that they're recognizing that, hey, this isn't just going to be something in 2025. Everyone has to update, but they're going to port these things back to 2016. I think that covers the majority. I think I'd be really surprised to see, other than maybe an old root CA still on 2012 stuck in a closet somewhere, the odds are 2016. That means essentially for the typical enterprise, we're going to see these updates available over the coming months as they backport these into the different versions of the operating systems.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing and hearing from other places as well.
Yeah. So why don't we jump into some of the updates that were recently made available. One is around CRL partitioning. And Jake, you and I spend a lot of time with customers around strategies of OCSP and CDP locations and what works and what doesn't work. And just at the sake of probably some foundational things for people that may need a little bit of a primer, when we talk about revocation, frankly, from our perspective, having a resilient revocation method, whether that's OCSP or a revocation list, this is the process that will ultimately break and cause all of your certificates to not function at a point in time.
Yeah, revocation.
Yeah, it's always revocation. Now, there are dozens and dozens of things that can break that cause a problem with revocation in the end. And there are things that we can mitigate through the use of load balancers, multiple locations, OCSP and CRLs. but you have to have revocation that is available in the organization, and it has to be timely. Within the Microsoft operating system, if you haven't gone through one of the courses, you may not know the maximum you'll ever have to get revocation is 5 seconds. Meaning, can I get to the URL, negotiate the header, download that file, parse through the file, and determine if something's been revoked or not. Same thing with OCSP. As that revocation gets larger and larger, subjective term. As it gets larger and larger, I may not have enough time to do that. Now, if you are on a high latency, low bandwidth, the size that is large may be considerably smaller than someone has a much larger pipe. So this is a very subjective thing. But at the end of the day, if you can't check revocation, all of your certificates will be affected. And this can cause problems from an HSM that's not available, that prevented your CA from publishing a CRL, through a CA that has a hiccup or is offline and can't publish it, all the way through the file's there and clients can't get. And these are problems we see all the time with customers, right, Jim?
Yeah. What we see even is behind a load balancer. I've had load balancers go down, which is odd because the servers behind them are up and working. So all kinds of crazy things. A reboot and your CA didn't start again because they couldn't talk to HSM, but it leads to revocation failure. So that's a huge thing.
Yeah. And it's one where you can't really architect your way out of now having a CRL failure. You can put controls in place, you can try to monitor it, but it's something that needs attention. So one of the things that comes up is a lot of organizations don't use OCSP, and the distinction is a revocation list is a file essentially that is updated with things that are revoked. If I have a lot of things that have been revoked, that revocation list can get quite large.
Yes.
The problem is if that's too large, I can't move it in a timely basis. And I know I've worked cases over the years where it's 5-10 meg CRL file. For many organizations, that's just too big to move. Plus, I'm doing a 10 meg file for thousands of clients. That's a lot of data I'm moving around. OCSP was the alternative. OCSP is more of a query style. Hey, I need to see if this one thing is revoked. I have to go out. But that is a timely process of that responder has to be there in order to answer it. And I simply ask about one thing. That takes more servers, more infrastructure. And most OCSP servers are dependent on the CRL. So we're back to that again. One of the kludgy things that we had was manual CRL partition. So when you would renew a Microsoft CA, when you renewed with a new key, that new key would be used to sign a new CRL. So a CA that was recently renewed may be publishing a original CRL and a secondary CRL for that new key, because we have certificates that are tied to the first CRL. So sometimes in organizations where they didn't want to do OCSP or didn't support OCSP, if that CRL was starting to grow, we would say, okay, renew your CA. It was a way of forcing the creation of another CRL. All of those old certificates would still be tied to this old CRL that was maybe 3 meg, 4 meg, and we stopped it. Everything going forward would be a new CRL. But creating a new CA and a new key, that's complex. Jake, you work a lot of issues with customers of updating devices,
that's the biggest challenge now. Getting that new key out to all the non-Windows, and especially now when MDMs, there's a lot of places you have to distribute that key. So that task has grown considerably over the years.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting with CRL partitioning that's built in, essentially what you can do with this new capability is you can tell ADCS, I don't want to have just one CRL file that's just going to perpetually grow, is I want to have multiple CRLs. And you can define a number. For instance, I want to have 5 CRLs. I want to have 10 CRLs. When each certificate is created, it will get placed into the database and indicate which CRL will be responsible for that. Now, if it hasn't been revoked, it's not quote unquote in the CRL. It will just get assigned to that one in the future. But that means when the certificate is issued, it will have a different URL that points to a CRL that corresponds to it. So if I set up my ADCS with this capability to have 10 CRL partitions, my CA is going to create 10 CRLs. Even if nothing's been revoked, I have to have an empty, signed, time-valid CRL that corresponds to each one that I've created. When a certificate is revoked, the CA can go, oh, this belongs to this partition. I will place it in this CRL. It's a bit of a round robin. So what in theory should happen over time is if I've created my CA and said, hey, I want to have 10 partitions, if I revoke 10 certificates, there are odds are one in each of the CRLs. Now, it won't exactly work that way because it depends on when they were issued and how it goes out there. But the intent is to distribute. You can still wind up with one CRL that's larger than the other simply because those happen to be the ones that you revoked. But what it should do is distribute that load across multiple CRLs. So now for my systems that want to do revocation checking, I don't need to download a 5 meg file. I may only need to go download one file that's 1 meg because that pertains to the certificate I'm interested in. Now the data I'm going to move is still more than OCSP, but I don't have to move a big file over a pipe. It simply is a bit static. Now there are different implementations that are out there. This isn't necessarily the one I would have chosen. I think a better way, there are things that you can basically do, say, hey, every 500 certificates, create a new partition, like doing it from a quantity. So I know that my CRL will never be more than 500 certificates worth of information at a time. And I'm not predefining a maximum size. So it's a choice. It's better than nothing. I see some questions coming up of, will this work with OCSP? It should. So when you think about Microsoft OCSP, you simply say, what CRLs do I want to reference to provide this revocation information? The challenge is going to be a couple of things. One is if you define a number of partitions, let's say it's 10 again, you're going to need to make sure you've got 10 provider revocation configurations on your OCSP because it's going to be 10 different CRLs for it to look at. You're also going to need to make sure that your OCSP information is in those certificates, which you can do today. It does mean that you probably won't be able to retroactively go back and change these things. That is something that we kind of have to figure out. How do we kind of put these things into place? But it is some new capability that's out there, and we do see this with other products. So it is just another alternative way of doing this. But one thing I'll say is, if you have challenges monitoring the creation of one CRL, realize now that you're going to have 10 CRLs in this particular case. And at some point, you'll renew your CA. So you'll still have CA renewals at some point. So take that very simple scenario of I have a CA, I have a CRL, I renew it, now I've got 2. If you've been using 10 partitions, guess what? You're going to have 10 CRLs for that first CA. When you renew it, you're going to have another 10. So now you're going to have 20 CRLs. They'll all be very small, but now you're going to need to make sure you have the ability to monitor 20 CRLs. So partitioning is just making that information in a smaller space. We also saw from Microsoft, Jake, I think you took a look at this. It's all configuration driven, right? There's no GUI to set this stuff up.
Yeah, that's yeah. Once it's there, right? It's not fully there. We can see bits and pieces now with some of the early builds, but right now it's not available to us. I've heard August is when we'll be able to actually fully have this implemented and configure and start testing with it. Yeah.
And I think the one smart thing is because of the way that they're doing the configuration there, this is something that you should be able to slip into an existing product. Because if we think about the default configuration is there's one partition. So everything is being added to one CRL. If I go in and say, hey, I want to have 2 partitions, everything that's been issued previously is going to be tied to the existing CRL. But going forward, anything I issue or renew should basically flop back and forth between the original partition and the second partition. They haven't really disclosed any logic to say, are they looking at capacity going, wow, I have 10,000 certs that are referencing quote unquote partition 1 from stuff I've been doing in legacy, and now I can do 2. Will it basically issue the next 10,000 assigned to partition 2, or will it flip flop? Like that kind of logic, I don't think we've seen any information from Microsoft on exactly how it determines. Yeah. No, is it a simple round robin? Is there capacity? I don't know, right? So I think that's certainly some of the questions that we're getting down the road. but the intent is we'll have a way of managing the size of CRLs in organizations that don't want to or can't use OCSP. So that, I think that's an important change. Anything that's come to your mind, Jake, as far as gotchas that customers are going to get with this?
The only thing I guess I would add is that I've seen a general decline in implementing online responder. And I've seen clients, moving to remove it. And I don't know if that has anything to do with a lot of the third-party CA starting to do that. They're doing it obviously for different reasons, but it's something that a lot of our clients, we have a few clients that have enormous CRLs.
Yeah.
The majority of our clients don't have large CRLs. So this, for the most part, probably won't be a huge thing. For a lot of clients. For some clients, it'll be really good.
The other change that they came out, they talked about some of the audit changing capabilities. What's kind of come to your mind as far as what those capabilities are?
So I think a lot of this kind of made its way in, or at least the start of it, is when we all saw the thing for the strong certificate mapping. Now we're getting really good detailed events on our domain controllers and things like that. So we're just adding to that, and I think it's going to give us a lot more detailed events that we can start pulling out. So these are net new, that we're going to want to be watching for. They're not on the old list that, when we used to have these are the events you should be watching, and so this is going to be new, and it's going to give us a lot more detail geared toward being more secure in our certificates. Are they mapped properly? Or all the things like that. So
and that's stuff that we've been kind of focused on.
The other.
And that's definitely kind of the changing landscape of, we do a lot in Spotlight from visibility and kind of configuration and audit capabilities. That's one place where, since there hasn't been changes in the product for a while, seeing some additional audit capabilities within certificate services, such as full information about issued certificates in the event log, as opposed to just, hey, a certificate was issued. Having more detail there means more ability to get that integrated into SIM systems or other types of operational tools. So there's kind of this maturing of the security landscape, because certificate services auditing really hasn't changed since Server 2003. In 12, we kind of added the more granular advanced auditing capabilities, but the information's been a little lagging there. So seeing some more in-depth audit information really kind of helps organizations that are focused on security, which a big area that we emphasize. It's not just about resilience and having a PKI. You need to make sure the stuff is secure, and having real-time information through audit and configuration is critical to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I first joined the company, I remember one of your first things you had said, Mark, was a poorly designed PKI is worse than no PKI at all. So going back to that mantra, this is a way to keep better track of it and be more secure with it, because we're using it for so much more now.
The other area was not just a product update, but kind of fits into that post-quantum cryptography space, and that was a seemingly minor change, but a foundational thing. So as we've been seeing this change towards post-quantum, these algorithms are different size keys, the requests that will be coming in. It was known that, hey, the existing database schema wasn't going to be large enough to support requests that are using things like MLChem. So having these new post-quantum NIST certified algorithms available for certificate services meant the database needed to be updated. So the recent update had a command sequence that you can run that updates the database schema. It is a one-way change, meaning you can go from the existing format to a new format with this larger database schema for key sizes. You will not be able to roll that back. So an important thing as we kind of think about database updates, as I've seen customers that have done things of, hey, we have a hot standby server sitting somewhere. Careful consideration thinking about this one-way change. The only other time we kind of had this trick move, if I remember right, Jake, it was as we moved customers from old versions of ADCS you had to do that intermediary jump to server 2016. You couldn't go from 12 to 19. If memory serves me right, 16 was a mandatory stop simply because of database changes. This will kind of be the same thing. So it is something that even if you're not starting to use the post-quantum algorithms yet, when you're ready to implement, it certainly doesn't break RSA, it won't break ECC, it will just make that database capable of those larger ones.
Yeah, exactly.
So as that kind of fits into that post-quantum capability, a couple of things. At least here in the US, NIST is driving the majority of the algorithm selection. The primary cryptographic algorithms have already been selected, MLChem, MLDSA. These are already in the Microsoft operating system, and there's a few steps as it gets ready for certificate services to have. And one is at a low-level driver called SymCrypt. That is just the base level driver within Windows. That already has these new algorithms already in there, which means from an operating system perspective, it knows how to do things like MLChem and MLDSA. The next level is to have a CNG driver, a crypto next generation driver, which is what software uses to be able to talk to that library. That's what things like Windows needs in order to do enrollment for a certificate using MLChem, MLDSA. The next level up is ADCS needs to be updated. So things like template configurations, enrollment, policy modules are able to do that. That was part of Tanya Yaz, the product manager's announcement, is that they are actively working on including that. So the CNG driver will be the next thing. That is in the Windows Insider Ring, which is that early access program that Microsoft has. That was already released last month to the Windows Insider. So the CNG driver, which is that second step, is already available. The work has been done, is in that Insider Ring, which means it will then move to general availability pushed out through Windows updates. The next step that they're actively working on is getting all of the ADCS interfaces and capabilities updated to use that driver. We already know that hardware security manufacturers, or hardware security modules, the manufacturers are updating or have already updated those algorithms as well. So we know those capabilities are there. So Jake, I know we're talking to customers a lot about post-quantum.
Yes.
It's a lot of uncertainty, right? 2030, not 2030. How's this hitting a lot of customers today?
It's on everyone's mind. Obviously the HSMs I think are going to be a key point for a lot of our clients. The new 140-3 FIPS certified HSMs are all capable of the post-quantum cryptography already. Some of our clients are starting to do that replacement. So, and I kind of lump this in with the big changes happening right now is, along with all the other things, all the HSM models are getting ready to need to be upgraded. So there's going to be a lot of change going on and going into the post-quantum. That's going to be a big piece of it. It will do some lifting off of if you have these HSMs. You're not as dependent on the Windows side of it as someone running a software-based PKI.
Yeah, and this is another place where there's been a lot of marketing FUD out there. Hey, Microsoft's not updating ADCS. You should buy our product. We have post-quantum algorithms. Honestly, there wasn't ever any doubt in my end for the algorithm support. It would make absolutely no sense for Microsoft not to do this. But as some people kind of responded online, the proof is in pudding. So the ability for them to actually see Microsoft doing this was a fundamental thing. But I know a lot of customers were like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my PKI, because I don't know if Microsoft is going to support these. And it wasn't until that was officially out there that they could really say, hey, this is something we can continue to depend on. It will take us to the post-quantum side. The irony is most customers are not running out tomorrow to deploy this. Like I don't think we've had any customer that said, hey, I want to start using the PQC algorithms. Well, we had one customer. They're kind of a leading edge customer. And as soon as we said, you don't have any applications that are going to support this, standing up a PKI that has post-quantum algorithms, they seem really cool, but it's going to sit there and do nothing.
Exactly.
And then they suddenly go, okay, this is a bigger thing. But an important step where we now are essentially 2 out of those 3 requirements. We should see that very soon.
Yeah.
So Jake, I know an important thing that you want to talk about was the CAP forum changes.
Yes. Yeah. Again, along with all these changes that are coming in, the CAP forum is making some big changes that are getting a lot of attention. We had one earlier already where there's been some requirements around security and validating who has the rights to issue certificates. That actually stopped some of our clients, broke their ability to request certificates from their provider. The one on everyone's mind right now is by 2029, we're going to be at that 45, 47 day range for certificates. But the biggest part of this confusion right now is who all does it apply to? And so it applies to the third-party CAs, and it applies to the browsers. So you have your browser, you go to a website internally that is issued by your PKI, it's not going to impact you. So, but there's a lot of certificates that are going to need to be updated from the public CAs. But so this has been something that I've gotten a ton of questions on. I'm in the process of working on a blog to really drive this out that we should have out real soon to really detail this. And then also, if you want to look under the covers and see exactly how it's doing it, that's what I'm explaining here. So, we mentioned Acme there. That seems to be the solution a lot of clients are going to until they realize you have to put an agent on system. So there's a lot of concern right now around it. I don't think it's going to be nearly as bad as everyone thinks. It's not going to impact their ADCS PKI.
This is a public CA thing, and enterprise PKIs are not the ones that are issuing certificates to the public websites and things that are getting trusted in that sense. So, support around Acme, I saw that in the chat a little earlier. While important for web-facing public certificate capabilities, the fact that it doesn't exist in ADCS doesn't really kind of factor into that problem. And I think a big concern that customers have is kind of conflating the public certificate TLS issue with what they do in their own enterprise for that internal stuff. So a lot of conversations with customers, rest assured, your existing process that you're doing isn't going to be affected by the public side. And this is not a cryptography driven thing. This is around, there are more and more incorrect issuance issues in the public space that by reducing the lifetime reduces some of that risk. It's not a cryptography driven thing. If you're in your own organization, you're managing things, it's not the same risk factors. There is a phase into the 45 days. It's over the next 2 years. Is that right, Jake? It's 2027.
Over the course of, so by 26, we'll have again, we'll get 200, 100, and we'll be down to that 47 by in 2029. So we have a little bit of time to be doing this. So
so internally, you're still able to do certificates that are, you still want to go based off of the validity of the cryptographic algorithm strength. So the 2-year cert, 1-year cert, those are all still perfectly acceptable. In limited use cases, sometimes 5 years. It depends on what they're being used for, what cryptography is at play. But the important thing is, yes, you need to be aware of these changes. Yes, you need to be thinking about what automation your hosting system or your public-facing certificate. Maybe the one thing customers need to think about is if they're relying on public CAs for their internal certificates, it may be time to start looking at, hey, we need our own PKI, because that's unruly to give I may be able to find Acme for my device to get certificates, but how am I going to handle my smart cards or my other user base? I don't want my employees to have to do that every 45 days. So there could be a tie into that public space, but the vast majority of enterprises that are using private PKIs aren't going to really be affected by I think we'll also continue to see more roots kicked out of the trust stores because of these trust issues. We recently had the Intrust issue and being ultimately acquired by Sectigo. The public CA space is just sometimes a cesspool. So sorry, I'm just going to go there. When you're selling something for $19 or Let's Encrypt is giving away for $0, it's hard to maintain some of those risk areas.
Yeah, exactly.
Just we'll get to Q&A here in just a second, but just kind of recap what we've gone through. ADCS active again in a development perspective. We've got a product manager. We're actively working with Tanya and her team, trying to find ways to get her more in front of this audience and the customer base. I've seen questions. The question I've seen for 20 plus years: when will ADCS support SQL Server? I told customers back in the day when I was at Microsoft, Microsoft will do it when you can go to them and tell them why you have a legitimate business case to need SQL Server. Remember, the Jet database that you're complaining about is the same thing that drives Active Directory. It's the same thing that Exchange used. While it may not be SQL, it worked for what it needs to do. Could it be better? Sure. But no one has ever really been able to articulate to Microsoft, here's why our business is affected because it's not on SQL Server. Now, that being said, with a product manager, I will happily make an introduction for someone who believes that their organization is greatly impacted by not being on SQL. I have nothing against SQL. I'd be happy to have that item put to rest. I will make the introduction. You can make your business case to Microsoft, and I will happily support that by saying, yes, I've seen lots of people ask it. Sometimes it's also one of those marketing things that the other guys pick up on is, oh, well, we can support SQL Server, Microsoft doesn't. Okay, great. What PKI hasn't functioned because of that? So we are seeing updates. We will continue to see those updates, and we will do what we can to get Tanya and her team in front of you. Post-quantum support, we've got 2 of the barriers addressed so far. We're expecting a 3rd one very soon. That's not just an expectation. It's been publicly communicated by Tanya and her team that they are actively working on that. So that will be coming. So that is an official announcement of PQC capabilities within ADCS in the short term. And obviously the CAD forum is doing the CAD forum things. I'm sure we'll see more updates down the road as we go through. Now, I know there's been some questions coming through, so let's just take a minute or two to go through some of these. So one is, as we look at the 45 days, the public-private, we kind of talked about that. 45 days, moving towards that, that's all in the public CA space. The only place that can really kind of come down to affecting internal or private sides of things is when we are talking about customers that are using a public CA or internal certificates. Do we see very many of those anymore?
Not very often. In cases, a lot of times it's to prove that an issue isn't certificate related, and it usually gets pulled. Very, very seldom. Yeah.
Other questions around Acme. I know this is something that Tanya brought up herself. So I think that is on her radar of addressing Acme support. I think as she does these customer feedback sessions, she's going to be asking, is Acme important? Is it a non-issue? I will tell you internally, this is not something that comes up as a hard stop. There are other enrollment technologies that are out there. Acme works great on the public PKI space for Let's Encrypt and kind of doing the set forget kind of perspective. From the enterprise place, do we see very many, like this use case just doesn't work because there's no Acme support? Is that something you've come across, Jake?
No, we're seeing more of it, and that's where some of the CLMs have stepped in. Keyfactor, I don't know Venafi, but Keyfactor does have the ability to act and use Acme to go back to our ADCS servers.
Another question around DoD FIPS, STIG compliance. One of the challenges as you add new capabilities in there, getting things like FIPS compliance, these things take a long time. Even the hardware security manufacturers, now that we've got the FIPS 100-3, it takes a while for these things to go through. So from a software perspective, those algorithms can't get 140-3 level 3 like a hardware security module, but they can do the level 2 FIPS compliant. We will see them in the operating system before they ever receive FIPS certification of mapping to that. So that is something that will definitely take a longer period of time. So I do definitely recognize in the certified space where there's a requirement to map the FIPS, it will take longer. I don't know what that open communication is. It hasn't been something that I've been able to talk with Tanya yet, but I'll make a note to see if we can get some clarity of their intent to do that. It would be surprising if they didn't do that. Cloud PKI versus ADCS, that cloud PKI that they announced, this is that the Intune integrated cloud PKI. Yeah. It has a lot of reduced capabilities. It really only does client authentication type things. Jake, have we seen very many customers use this? I know we did a session on this when it first came out.
It got a lot of attention early on. People, I think, viewed it as a true replacement. And honestly, there's not been much going on with it, and it's very limited in scope of what it will do. I mean, it has its place, but it's not it's not a replacement for a regular CA.
I would expect we'll see some hybrid scenarios. Like one of the things I talked to the former product manager, Rashmi, about many years ago, she actually had started down the path of updating a cryptographic next generation driver to use Azure for HSM capabilities for ADCS. Because again, it's just a driver that's needed. Gives us that hybrid of, hey, I can have an on-prem. And this was just as things like Dpod from Talos was coming out, and Intrust had the Insight for HSM as a service. And they never completed that work. There may be, with this new product team, a renewed interest of, hey, we already have these capabilities. Why don't we address the hybrid approach as well? And then that leverages some of the other Microsoft assets that are out there as well. Another question of kind of like new pieces of information, the additional audit information, lots more CRLs. Someone asked, how does that fit in the spotlight? It's something that we're kind of having to sit down as a team and think about, where are these technologies going to go wrong? How do we suggest to customers from a programmatic standpoint with Spotlight, hey, you're not doing CRL partitioning, you should. What does that threshold look like? What are those trigger things that we can look at and say something's right, something's wrong here? On the inverse is, hey, you've got 20 CRL partitions, but you don't really need it. You've got way too much complexity. You should dial this back. So we're having to react to these changes as well. Some of the things like the audit log configuration, we are already doing all that kind of stuff. So that doesn't, we created our own audit log capabilities, because what Microsoft provides in the system event log isn't detailed enough. It doesn't cover enough areas. So we're not really affected by that. But these new capabilities, or even take a simple thing like, is the database been updated for the PQC schema? Well, that's something that we now need to look at. How can we detect that in the database? So we're reacting and updating Spotlight to find some of these trouble spots, because now we can't just say, hey, look at this CA certificate and look to see if its CRL in its places is updated. We need to say, we expect to see 12 CRLs. Are there 12 per certificate? And then what happens if the configuration says 12 today, but yesterday it was 8? We need to know that we're only expecting 8. So because you can change the size of the partitioning, we have to have a way of recognizing that as well. So we're playing a little bit of catch up a little bit, because most of the stuff that we build in the Spotlight, it's Jake and I having seen it for 20 plus years, and we go, oh, this happens all the time. We can sit down with the product team and say, oh, if this, then that's wrong. This new stuff, we're having to think about the problems before you guys see them and actually run into it. So we're playing catch up, I'll admit, in that regard. So I'll take one last question. I know we've gone a little long here, but something that a lot of people want to talk about. But one is this whole thing around client authentication changes. So this is another thing coming out that the CAP forum is, you would get a TLS certificate really for the purpose of doing server authentication. And most of the time they just throw in client authentication. Most places didn't use it, but that enabled mutual authentication. This server can talk to that server, both as server and identity. They're getting rid of the client authentication side. Is that something customers have? Is that even on their radar? I know I hear a lot about the post quantum, the 45 days. Are they even worried about this problem yet, or is this just one more thing from the CAD forum that they haven't got to yet?
One more thing at this point, as far as what I'm hearing and seeing it down the list, there's other things that are from the CAD forum, and I'll just say it's something that we didn't used to pay as much attention to, but I'm starting to pay a lot. Basically, I want to get the word out because I know a lot of people don't have the chance to follow along with CAD forum. There's some other things coming towards the end of this year, like DNSSEC. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of changes coming from them, and we're going to do a better job of keeping everyone, up to date on that. But I don't see much from that dropping the client off from the public CAs.
Well, I think an interesting insight I'll add onto that. That recent change that we saw recently around the multi-domain verification, where it was checking DNS records, it had to be replicated, it had to be in multiple DNS providers around the world. To get around the possibility of someone compromising DNS information in one place, when a certificate is issued, they're now required to check DNS records in multiple places. Some of our customers weren't replicating that information.
Correct. They were doing geo-blocking, and that stopped them from issuing certs.
Yeah, and they had to kind of go to some of the other providers that were still kind of trialing it. I reached out to the head of the CAD forum and said, "Hey, do you realize that you guys are that this is a big disruption and that there's been very little communication?" And he said, "We don't have a communications arm. We don't have something within the CAD forum to officially let the world know we're making changes. Their agenda and their limitation is simply the participants of the CAD forum, the browsers, the CAs, the operating systems, the participants are all in there, and they know about those changes. They depend on organizations like us or the press to report impactful things to everyone around the world." And that just kind of struck me of, no wonder we keep running into more of these things. And it's also one of, in the future, there'll be more of these types of changes that come down the road that people are going to have to look out for. And it's hard from an end user perspective to look for it. But just know there will be more changes. We're going to do our best to try to get those things out there as well. But I think they meet on a quarterly basis. I mean, there are changes all of the time. So we will see many more changes out there. Jakes, we covered a lot in this session. Any kind of parting thoughts, anything that you want to leave with our record-setting attendance for this webinar?
Basically, that we're trying to stay ahead of it. I think we had talked a little bit with the push to 2025 and the spirit of this call. Our training, updating our training. Our labs and everything now are built on server 2025. We'll be cutting that over so students can actually use 2025 and see it. There are some other changes in 2025 that we didn't have. They're smaller, more technical that we'll be getting out there, but there are little changes here and there to be aware of, and we'll do our best to keep everyone up with it.
Yeah, I think that was a great thing. You guys going through and updating all the training labs to 25. You kind of came back and go, "Hey, Mark, our course had a useful lesson on migrating a CA from one OS to the other, but was predicated on moving from SHA-1 to SHA-2. We're way past that barrier, and you rightfully said, "Hey, why don't we update this scenario so as customers get ready for 2025? The good thing is what you learn in there is the same as 2019, 2016 from a capability perspective. And I'm sure we will go back to those courses as these features become available. And we'll be getting further blogs out as we actually get our hands on CRL partitioning and we find the things that the product team maybe didn't necessarily think about. So if you guys wind up touching some of these new capabilities and you run into issues, let us know. We still maintain the hotfix and known issues publicly on our site. We'd like to make sure that we're getting that information out to others. So if you run into problems with CRL partitioning, the schema update for PQC, the new audit capabilities, or anything that comes out with the CNG driver, drop us a note, let us know. We'll try to get the word out as well. Thanks again for joining us. Those of you that are with us for the first time, Hopefully you'll join us again next month. I apologize, we don't have our session available. I'm going to be on a little bit of vacation, so I've left it to the team. So look for some more information on LinkedIn, on the website, and our social media. And we'll get another session next month. If there are questions that we didn't get to the team, we'll be going through that, and we'll do our best to follow up with everybody. And we'll get this uploaded and available on our YouTube channel as soon as we can, and you can share it with everybody else. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you in July, and have a great summer.
Thank you.